How much stronger are Ellen team comps compared to the other top DPS? That has been a question on my mind ever since Pridewind put her a whole 2 tiers above the rest. So to answer the question and quantify this placement, I tested her against 2 other 5-star DPS, Soldier 11 and Nekomata, using Pridewind's build and team recommendations. Also, this was done on the creator experience server, so thank you to hoyoverse for inviting me to test out their game. If you are interested in trying out Zenless Zone Zero, feel free to use the link down below. So for how the testing is done, first off, I wanted to test the characters in a meaningful place where the content is hard and is considered quote-unquote endgame. So that brought us to Shiyu defense. However, quantifying and comparing the character's performance in this specific endgame content is extremely difficult. Why is that? Well, see, in Shiyu defense, certain enemies are only weak to certain elements, and some enemies are also more resistant to specific elements. More so, enemies could also gain a shield that will deplete faster only if you have the right element against it. So I had to find out the perfect floor that can allow for a relatively fair testing ground. Now, the later stages of CU defense, this purple section here, contain floors that will have specific buffs that are skewed towards favoring certain elements. For example, every floor here favors ice and ether, so therefore this will be off the menu. And so that leaves us with only a few options left. But luckily for us, Shiyu defense floor 9 is our answer. This floor contains 2 sides, one where the enemies are weak to ice and one where the enemies are weak to physical and fire. So therefore we'll run the characters on both sides. For example, Ellen, Nico, and Soldier 11 will do both the first and the second half. Then we'll combine the best time that they get for both sides together. This way we will be able to test each DPS on a neutral ground and on one that is favorable for them. So in order to score each character's team's performance, from the many runs and attempts that I tested for each team, I'll be taking the best time that it took each DPS to clear both sides. As for the builds, I'll be keeping all the characters and their weapon at level 50 since the enemies are around level 45. Furthermore, all the DPS will have around 45% crit rate and 90% crit damage. First up, we have Soldier 11. For her build, I'll be using a level 50 S1 Starlight engine, 4-piece Infernal Metal, and 2-piece Woodpecker Electro, and we'll be running her with the standard crit build. Note that if you are running the 4-piece Infernal Metal, make sure that the enemies are burned before dumping your load with her, so try to avoid using your ultimate unless the enemies are burned. As for her teams, there are really only a few options for her like Koleda or Piper. But regardless, I'll be testing her with Lucy and Koleda. This is her best team since Soldier 11 will want to be on field often, and for Shiyu defense, Lucy's role is very crucial. She'll provide an attack buff to the entire team when we press or hold down our X special. Furthermore, doing this will also summon minions that will allow her to deal off-field damage. Refreshing Lucy's attack buff is important to do, especially before crucial moments like chaining our attacks or using her ultimate. Furthermore, as I mentioned earlier, we want to make sure that the enemy is under the burn status to trigger our 4-piece Infernal Metal set for an extra 28% crit rate. As seen here, once all the buffs are aligned, we use Soldier 11's Giga Ultimate for an absurd amount of damage that basically eviscerates the whole enemy's HP bar. Yeah, there's just something so satisfying about seeing the entire HP bar get deleted. Regardless, the Soldier 11 team was able to just destroy the second half since the enemies are all weak to fire, and so from all my attempts, the best time that I was able to get was an insanely fast score of 1 minute and 8 seconds. However, will Soldier 11 also perform well in the first half since the enemies are weak to ice and not fire? Just like the second half, the enemies on the stage starts off with a shield. And this shield isn't just any shield, but one that is very resistant to anything that isn't ice. Nevertheless, Soldier 11 and friends were still able to brute force their way through, and with the full combo, we still managed to deal an insane amount of damage with her ultimate against the final elite. And for this half, my best run was 2 minutes and 8 seconds, nearly double the time that it took for the second half. Nonetheless, despite all that, we were still able to get a combined score of 3 minutes and 16 seconds for both of the halves. Not bad at all, but will Ellen's team fall into the same fate and slow down drastically when matched against enemies that are not weak to ice? Let's find out. As you guys saw, similar to Honkai Star Rail, in Zenless Zone Zero, teams tend to gravitate more towards characters of the same element. So will Ellen's best team, the classic Mono Ice, be able to overpower this content? For her build, I'll be using the same weapon as Soldier 11, a level 50 S1 Starlight engine. For the disc, we'll be using a 4-piece Woodpecker Electro and 2-piece Puffer Electro, and of course, building her attack and crit oriented. As for her teammates, we'll be testing 2 teams with her. The first is of course her premium team with Lycon and Sukaku, and the second is more relatable with Anbi instead of Lycon. For the first half, the opener and the rotation for Ellen was pretty standard. We started off with Ellen's technique in order to enter the roaming state before battle. We then hold down our attack to get 3 stacks of flash freeze charges. We then wait for the enemy to attack us so that we can perfect dodge into our roaming state once more and grab 3 more stacks. Here I then waited for the enemy to attack, then swap to light cone to start the dazing process. Then once we trigger the chain attack, I'll swap to Sokaku so that we can deal some big damage as well as buff up our Ellen for the finishing blow. Now for this final mob, we start by bringing it very close to being dazed, but note that I do not start the daze with light cone. I swapped over to Sokaku instead in order to get the vortex stacks. This will allow us to essentially get the full ice damage buff and attack buff for our character Ellen before the attack chain starts. So yeah, therefore either starting the chain attack with Sokaku or with Ellen is totally fine. And with that, we are able to finish off the mob with a humongous ultimate into 2x specials and a few autos. And coincidentally enough, similar to Soldier 11 on her strong side, Ellen is also able to get a score of 1 minute and 8 seconds exactly. How convenient. But the question now becomes, what about her weaker side, the second half? So for this half, it was a bit more difficult, especially when we got to the elite boss, since the shield really held us back. But once we took that down and did our normal rotation, we were able to dump a ton of damage. However, unlike the first half, this half took us 2 full rotations to finish off the mobs. Regardless, even if it was a bit slower, we still managed to get a score of 1 minute and 34 seconds, for a combined total of 2 minutes and 42 seconds, which is extremely impressive considering that Soldier's 11 combined score was 3 minutes and 16 seconds. However, what about a less premium team? What if we took out Lycon and replaced him with Anbi? Since neither of the enemies on both halves are weak to lightning, one must think that Anbi will underperform in this situation. But shockingly, this Ellen's team performance was still so damn impressive. As for the first half, we still managed to defeat the final boss in 1 rotation and a couple of attacks for a score of 1 minute and 22 seconds. Only 14 seconds slower than Lycon. For the second half, we obtained a surprising high score of 1 minute and 48 seconds, which was once again only 14 seconds slower than the previous. So therefore, the final score for Ellen and Anbi is a whopping 3 minutes and 10 seconds. 28 seconds less than Lycon, but still faster than Soldier 11 and Coleta by 6 seconds. But there's a plot twist. Later I found out that the enemy in the second half was actually resistant to ice damage by 20%, meaning that even with 2 handicaps, Ellen was still able to perform really well. So therefore, Ellen is pretty dang strong, and maybe Pridewin is right to put her up so high. However, what about her performance against Nikomata? Let's find out if she's truly 2 tiers above the rest. So here we have Nikomata. There aren't that many great teams for her right now, as all her faction members are basically the free characters, and furthermore, the physical element options are heavily limited as well. However, Piper seems to be an amazing support for her, but Pridewin didn't include her in the team selection for some reason. Regardless, let's find out how she performs against Ellen. And similar to Ellen, we'll be using Anbi alongside Lucy to have a similar investment point as our Ellen team. For her build, I'll be using a level 50 S1 Starlight engine, a 4-piece Puffer Electro, and 2-piece Woodpecker Electro for the extra crit. And since she's a crit hyper carry, we'll be building her similar to everyone else with around 45% crit rate and 90% crit damage. Overall, for the first half, it went as expected since the enemies aren't weak to physical, so similar to Soldier 11, it took Nekomata quite some time to beat the mobs with a score of 2 minutes and 12 seconds. As for the second half, my goodness, she shredded that boss like it was paper. After using her ultimate and charging up her X stacks from the assaults, the boss did not stand a chance. As a result, we were able to obtain a tremendous score of 1 minute and 5 seconds, for a total combined score of 3 minutes and 17 seconds for Nikomata, which is pretty much the same as Soldier 11. However, do know that Nekomata was using Anbi instead of a 5-star premium stunner like Coleta, which is very impressive. Unfortunately, we cannot use Lycone or Coleta as they do not share the same element nor faction as Nikomata. Therefore, the only options are Anbi or Piper for that slot. And as you guys can see, with relatively similar investment, Ellen slightly edges above Nikomata by a few seconds. Not a lot at all. However, if Ellen had Lycone, that team would blow everyone out of the water. At this current state, no one doubts that Ellen is of course the best DPS regardless of her teammates. But is she 2 tiers above everybody else? The answer is yes if you are pairing her with Lycone, and no if you are not. And that's because characters like Nikomata do not have their premium premium supports yet. Therefore, once a new physical support releases, I bet that Nekomata will rise in ranks drastically as she is a very solid character. And same thing for Soldier 11 if they ever release a 5-star Lucy. So yeah, that's it. Let me know if you guys think Ellen is truly 2 tiers above the rest. Regardless, thank you guys for watching. The next video will be on my secret account, my no poll account for Zenless Zone Zero. So thanks for watching. I'll see you guys next time. Bye bye. Take care. See you later. Bye bye.